And before we begin, I would briefly like to introduce him to all of us. Ajahn Achalo was born in Brisbane, Australia in 1972, and he developed a keen interest in meditation at the age of 20. And a year later, he left for Thailand to study Buddhism. And after 2 years of period practicing in various centers and monasteries in Thailand, in 1996, Venerable Ajahn Achalo ordained as a Theravada Bhikkhu under Ajahn Liam, or Longpo Liam, at Wat Nong Pa Pong, Ubon Ratchathani Province, Thailand. The monastery founded by Venerable Ajahn Chah. And although most of his training has taken place in Thailand, Ajahn Achalo has also lived in several international forest monasteries in Ajahn Chah's lineage. And Ajahn Achalo is deeply grateful for his many opportunities to study with well-practiced monks, as well as for having been able to train under several traditional contexts, including meditation monasteries, remote forests, and periods on pilgrimage. So during his years of training, he has also received personal guidance from many remarkable teachers. Among them are Ajahn Sumeto, one of the first disciple of Ajahn Chah, Venerable Ajahn Pasanno, Venerable Ajahn Chayasaro, and Venerable Ajahn Kalayano. And for most of his bhikkhu life, he has considered Venerable Ajahn Anan, abbot of Wat Mak Chan, to be his principal mentor. In addition, he has also found the Dalai Lama's instruction and example to be of tremendous value. So this is the brief introduction that I would like to introduce about Venerable Ajahn. So without further ado, I would like to turn over this microphone to Venerable Ajahn Jokun Vajirayanamuni.
Good morning, everybody. I hear that you are about in the middle of a 15-day meditation retreat. So I rejoice in your practice. I hope your practice is going well. And, the subject of the talk is the 4 Brahma Vihara as a support to mental cultivation. So when we look at the basic teachings of the Buddha, Lord Buddha, when he discovered the 4 Noble Truths and he explained his discovery, the first one is the Noble Truth of dukkha. Many of you advanced students of Buddhism, you know these things well. So the discovery that all conditioned phenomena are unsatisfactory, bound up with dukkha, the body and mental phenomenon bound by birth, aging and death. Then the second Noble Truth, very important, the cause. We see Lord Buddha was like a doctor. He identified the illness, he identified the cause of the illness, he then explains to us that there is a cure, we can overcome the difficulties, the challenges, and then he explains the Eightfold Path, which is what we need to do to uproot the ignorance and the delusion, craving for and craving not for, that is a result of the ignorance. But when we come to Buddhist practice and we embrace Lord Buddha's instructions that the first noble truth is to be known, that means necessarily we are going to be looking at some painful things, some difficult things, uncomfortable things. And this is where the four Brahmaviharas, as initially as simple samatha practices, the metta practice, karuna, mudita, this can be a tremendous support in supporting the process of helping the mind to have, Lord Buddha describes the Brahmaviharas as a divine abiding, a pleasant abode in the here and now. So you've been sitting and walking for many hours, for many days, so you will know by now that there's a lot of pain in the body. You will know by now that when the mind is affected by hindrances, the 5 hindrances, the craving for, the craving not for, the sloth, the sleepiness, the restlessness, anxiety, worry, and various doubts, that there's pain involved in bearing with and trying to understand these things, trying to overcome these things. And so the metta practice as a samatha practice, when we do it sincerely, the simple wish, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may I be happy, when we become skilled at holding metta in the citta, in the mind, then it's adding a helpful support. The Thanajananand, my main teacher in Thailand, he emphasizes that cultivating metta supports the process of developing mindfulness, and then that supports the development of samadhi and wisdom. Some of the ways that metta bhavana helps is it lessens the amount of anger and irritation that we experience as the second hindrance. It also kind of sensitizes the mind to what a wholesome state is. We become familiar with a wholesome mental state, loving kindness, goodwill. And so when we have that as a reference, something that we cultivate several times a day and become familiar with, then we tend to notice when the unskillful mind states come in. Like you will notice some competition, some jealousy, or feeling threatened, or various things. And then you'll see you can feel that it's akusala dhamma, not wholesome, because the mind has become familiar with, attenuated to wholesome. The second of the Brahmaviharas, the compassion, is actually very important, because the situation that we're in as not fully liberated beings, Buddhist practitioners who aspire to purifying the mind, the best motivation is compassion. Like if you can find within yourself a deep and genuine caring about your situation, then it's not difficult to find the energy to do what needs to be done to better your situation. So the way of the worldly being is to ignore dukkha, try to avoid it, not pay attention to it, distract oneself from it. But the spiritual practitioner, particularly Buddhists, Lord Buddha explains to us, we have to know it. So we have to have a good look at it, and we have to learn its causes and learn in meditation how to separate that which knows, the mindfulness and clear comprehension, from that which is known. And that includes pleasant, neutral, and unpleasant. But as you're all in the middle of a meditation retreat, you will know that there is quite a bit of unpleasant that one has to deal with. And so the foundation of goodwill, having this capacity to support the conventional self in the process, also helps you to not give up, because you care about your situation. And then closely linked to mudita, the third Brahmavihara, is a recognition of your potential. So when you know that you have in Pali, the manusa sombat, the wealth of the human birth, this is the result of your past merits. that you also met the Buddha's teachings, and that you also have the opportunity to study them, and you also met instructions about the practice, the study and the practice of the Buddha Dhamma. This is a result of quite vast past merits. When you consider the population of the world now, somewhere between 8 and 9 billion, then you consider the population of the Buddhists, 500 million, and then you consider among those Buddhists, the people who have actually had the good fortune to really study the teachings, the Four Noble Truths, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, the Eightfold Path, etc., that's quite a small number of people. And then the people who have met the teachings and studied the teachings, who then have the opportunity to practice, that's even smaller. So with right view, understanding that the experiences that we meet with and the conditions that become available to us is a result of our past deeds. Everybody here, everybody listening, has really quite vast past merits, and this is an important thing to recollect sometimes, because there are periods in everyone's practice where you feel like, I can't do this, it's too hard, you want to give up. There might also be periods where it's like, well, I don't want to do it. It's not just that it's too hard, I just don't want to do it. And then sometimes we have to use these reflections to remind ourselves, well, the opportunity that you have was conditioned by millions of skillful deeds, and it's a very rare and precious opportunity, so one has to be careful about disregarding such an opportunity. But when we recognize the good fortune that we already have, you're not starting from sub-zero, you're not starting from zero, you're starting with some good merits, good fortune. Then the other thing to recollect is one's potential. When Lord Buddha realized his enlightenment, liberated and purified his mind, he went and taught the 5 ascetics at the deer park. And after 2 sermons, those 5 ascetics had all been liberated, had realized arahantship. And so he demonstrated very early on that this wasn't just the rare and special potential of beings that cultivate virtue for asankhya and 100,000 eons. This was the potential of any being who had sufficient spiritual powers to have insight, if they practiced correctly, that they could also purify and liberate their own minds. And so this is proof that this is the potential of the human being. And so that's something to actually rejoice in. That's like recognizing that your spiritual inheritance is part of the hardware, it's not part of the software. It's something that is always there. And so we recollect things like this to give a sense of courage, a sense of confidence, a sense of optimism. You have a long-term optimistic view that no matter how hard it might be, how difficult it might be, however many challenges there might be, ultimately, if we don't give up, we will realize the goal. So contemplating in that way, you have mudita, you have appreciation for your good fortune, you have appreciation for your potential, you have appreciation for your opportunity. And then because you care about this situation, recognizing that it doesn't have to be like this, then you get some good energy to do something about it, put up a bit of a fight, a noble fight. And that means, so how does that manifest? The noble fight to purify the mind manifests as the threefold training, the dana, sila, pavana. So we have to keep our ethical precepts quite strictly. That's the foundation. When we keep our ethical precepts, we are keeping the kilesa within a container, within parameters. This already weakens their power. If we don't feed them, keep feeding them, then they will get weaker over time. On the foundation of the ethical precepts, you study, of course. Most of you are from the monastic university. When we always have to remind ourselves that the wisdom, the path of practice of the Buddha Dhamma, Lord Buddha's teachings, has the 3 modes of cultivating wisdom. The Suttamaya Panya, the wisdom that comes from studying the texts, listening to your lecturers, reading the books. The Chittamaya Panya, that deeply considering, does it make sense? Is it logical? Develop a sense of conviction and trust, faith, confidence, love and respect for the teachings. Then also the Bhavanamaya Panya, that we apply what we've studied, that we knuckle down and that we really do some practice. Because this is what will liberate most people's minds. The people in the time of the Buddha who listened to a sermon and became enlightened, I believe that that is probably the case is that they've made a vow to become enlightened while listening to a Buddha. But the general process, as Lord Buddha explains, is Dana, Sila, Bhavana, and the 3 types of wisdom. We actually do have to meditate quite a lot to make sure that those 5 spiritual powers, the faith, the energy, and the last 3, the mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, are powerful enough to actually uproot the ignorance and the delusion. So that takes a commitment to consistency. And then if we are consistent, in general, our mindfulness gets better, our samadhi improves, and then we begin to have true insight, the vipassana jnana, the insight knowledges, generally more likely to experience these things in a retreat-like situation than in our daily practice. But in our daily practice, we need to have some kind of a foundation. So I would recommend, personally, as bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, novices and samaneris, sons and daughters of the Buddha, that we cultivate all 3 of these types of developing wisdom very sincerely. So I would recommend meditating in the morning before doing anything else. So we have to look at how I'm going to try to make this talk practical. Ajahn Ta, who invited me in previous years, asked me to give some practical advice. So, and particularly with regards, as I'm from the practice tradition, forest meditation tradition, he asked me to talk about practice and about meditation. So we have to look at what we do with our mind outside of the time that you're studying. These days, the portable devices, the tablets and the phones, they're a portal to the world. In 30 years ago, when I came to Wat Nanachat and became a Pakao, there was a wall around the monastery and there was a library. And in a very literal sense, that wall really was a wall. The monastery was inside and the world was outside. Everybody inside that monastery had to keep ethical precepts. If they didn't keep the ethical precepts, they were asked to leave. And so it was a very good situation for developing renunciation, patience, and beginning to develop mindfulness, concentration, wisdom. But then as these portable devices, the technology has developed, and there's Wi-Fi and data packages and everything, you can be in a monastery behind a wall and you have access to the whole world, kusala dhammas and akusala dhammas. And so this power, beautiful word in Pali, indriya samvara, the power of sense restraint. In the old days, we didn't have a choice. If you're in the forest monastery behind the wall, you were sense restrained. You had the books in the library, you had the Dhamma talk that the teacher would give, you had your friends that you could talk to, but we didn't even have newspapers or magazines. Now it's very different. You can watch movies, play computer games, do all sorts of things. And so one has to be careful about staying up too late with entertainment and distraction, social media, making all sorts of karma, commenting on things, sending the mind out into the world. We have to remember that all of us, myself included, we remind ourselves that we went forth from the home life. Sabba dukkha nisarana nibbana. For the sake of nibbana, I am going forth. And some monastic traditions recite this every day as a way of reminding ourselves. And so we have to look at how are we using these things? Are we using them in the spirit of monasticism in a way that's appropriate for people gone forth? In general, probably most people use them too much, and there's too much entertainment and distraction. And so we try to go to bed a bit earlier. I recommend making some kind of a rule for yourself that you don't use it past 9 p.m. After 9 p.m., turn off the phone. Put it on flight mode. It's like giving yourself a time each day where you're going on an inner journey. So flight mode, the alarms will still work. You can still check the time, but there'll be no annoying bing, 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 bings. And whoever's trying to contact you, you won't know. And it can wait till the next morning. When you go to bed a little bit earlier, then you get up a little bit earlier. And I recommend you get up, wash your face, brush your teeth, and then you do your meditation. You establish some presence of mind, some clarity, some mindfulness and clear comprehension. And then you have to have a kind of a resolution each day that you will bring this clarity into your daily life in all four postures, that you will try to recognize your mind states as wholesome, neutral, and unwholesome, and recognize them in time before they fully invade the mind. Luang Por Chah said, practice is like learning to have that which knows. The mindfulness and clear comprehension is like sitting in a seat in the room of the mind. And then as other things come in the room, the hindrances, the kilesas, you know them, you see them, but you don't let them sit down, you don't let them take over. You're aware of them as they arise, stay for some time and cease. But to have that kind of clarity, that kind of presence of mind, we have to actually cultivate it. Everybody has some mindfulness, but most people's mindfulness is a bit weak and fuzzy. So we actually make the effort to make our mindfulness good mindfulness, clear mindfulness, powerful mindfulness. That's the mindfulness that is the bala, the spiritual power. So that's my recommendation, is start your day with some practice, establish some clarity, some presence of mind. And then before you sleep as well. So you turn off your devices at 9 and stop playing with tablets and computers. Sometimes you have theses to write, sometimes you have assignments, I understand. But in general, try to stop sending the mind out into these things. And we remember in the morning, we're monks and nuns. We remember in the evening, we're still monk and nun, and have to behave like one. And then you establish some clarity and some peacefulness. And the benefit of meditating at the end of the day is there tends to be that kind of a sense of reviewing. How did the day go? And what did I get up to? But if you're kind of busy and your speech might have got a bit coarse and you got a bit distracted and then you're just exhausted and you fall asleep, you don't really recognize when you're looking at those 4 bases of success, the iddhipada, the last one is the reviewing. How are things going? Where do I need to tweak my behavior, adjust my behavior, improve my behavior? So I recommend some practice in the morning, some practice in the evening, and then when you have these retreat opportunities, if you've been able to maintain this foundation of some good ethical standards, studying Buddhism sincerely, cultivating a consistent quality of mindfulness. One thing that I've noticed about mindfulness in my 28 years of practice now is that it gets steadily stronger over time if we're consistent, but it doesn't actually grow very fast, unfortunately. The other thing that I've noticed about mindfulness is that it can be damaged quite quickly. So it's much harder to cultivate a resilient and consistent quality of mindfulness than it is to kind of throw it out and trash it and damage it and feel like you have to start all over again. So if anybody really wants to experience what is samadhi like, what is real samadhi like, the upajjhara samadhi, the apana samadhi, what is that like? Then you are going to need a good quality of mindfulness. And that good quality of mindfulness is built over time. So for myself these days, I'm not going to make any claims to being enlightened, but I can tell you that I do practice 5 times a day, and I have periods of retreat, several periods of retreat a year where I try to meditate between 8 and 10 hours a day. And when I wake up in the morning, if I did my evening practice, when I wake up in the morning, in general, I'm aware of the first in-breath. I'm aware of the next out-breath. And then when I get up to go to the bathroom, I can feel the feelings at the bottom of my feet as I go to the bathroom. And this is the result of 3 decades of practice. So it's like, and if a person can establish that kind of consistency, as you can imagine, it's not that difficult to go to your meditation mat, light some candles and incense, bow, and incline the mind to knowing the breath in more detail, because there was a broad awareness of it from the moment you woke up anyway. It's like, if we can make a consistent effort over a period of years and then over a period of decades, maintaining that consistency becomes easier. And so it's worth investing in. But if we do it in stops and starts, we take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, you don't have to be a genius to understand that doesn't go anywhere. So at the very least, you don't want to go backwards. So you try to have a commitment to daily practice that supports your development of insight, supports the development of samadhi, and this supports then the insight that will liberate you from all suffering. So if I tell you something a little bit personal, here I've just been telling you what you should do, what you need to do, and but nobody says it's easy. And I sometimes remind myself, and I did have to remind myself as a young monk, it was when I was an anagarika and a novice at Wat Nanachat, 6 days in every week I wanted to disrobe, because getting up at 3 a.m, having 1 meal a day, walking barefoot on sharp stones, sleeping on a straw mat, for somebody who had a middle-class life in Australia, was difficult. And why didn't I? Because I had faith in Lord Buddha and I believed in karma. And I noticed that when I was a 8 precept anagarika, all these other people were coming to the monastery that wanted to be monks. Sometimes their mother was unwell. Sometimes they were putting a sibling through university. Sometimes they got married, realized after they were married how much they respected Buddha Dhamma and wanted to practice. So all of these people were coming, staying for a week, 10 days, a month. They wanted to be monks, but they had obligations, some karmic obstruction. And I realized I was sitting there as a 22-year-old. I didn't have a big debt. I wasn't married. I didn't have any big commitment. I had the opportunity. And I felt that I had to, because I had right view, I had faith in Lord Buddha, I felt that I had to try. And the other thing is, like, there was that 1 day a week where the body felt light and the mind felt light, and there was a quality of serenity, tranquility, joy, hope, optimism, faith that I did not have in my life back in Sydney. And so I was aware, if I disrobe, I won't have this. I won't have this. And so I would determine at the end of 1 year to stay for 1 more pansa. That's all I could manage in terms of my deep commitment. And then after a year or 2, I wanted to disrobe maybe 3 days a week. But I noticed that, okay, there's more days in every week where that feeling of tranquility and serenity, well-being, resilient well-being, is becoming established in the heart. After 3 pansas, I determined, okay, 2 more pansas. After 5 pansas, I determined 5 more pansas. After 10 pansas, I determined 10 more pansas. After 20 pansas, I determined to the end of this life. But that kind of determination, Bharami, had to be built. We don't come to this life with all of our, well, most of us, some of us do, but most of us don't come to this life with all of our parami kind of fully maxed. We'd be liberated if we did. We have to build on them. And so for myself, the determination, the patience, the commitment, the discipline, everything I'm talking to you about is something that I had to knuckle down and cultivate. And it isn't easy. One of the things that my teacher told me when I first met him in the jungle, actually, Ampasayok in Kanchanaburi, Samnak Song Dao Dam. I was there as a 1 Pansa Bhikkhu, 24-year-old. My teacher, Tanajanana, actually came on Tudong with 5 or 6 other monks. I got to talk with him and I said, I'd been having an experience in my meditation where I was feeling tremendous weariness and tremendous sadness. And I didn't, I was wondering, is this depression? Am I crazy? And Tanajananan said, in the beginning, as the mind gets more sensitive, people can have the experience that they're in a house which is on fire and there's nowhere to go. So they feel that they're on fire also. And that really was how it felt. I remember feeling like the mind was full of suffering. I tried to make awareness bigger. The suffering would fill that awareness. I'd make the awareness bigger. The suffering would fill that awareness. And there really wasn't anywhere to go. And I had about 20 hours to myself a day in the jungle to have a look at it. And that's when he explained to me that you have to cultivate metta. For the first 5 to 10 minutes of every meditation session, he said, cultivate metta for yourself. He says, because the only way you get past this, because the sensitivity to dukkha becomes developed before the equanimity, the only way that you get through this is with patient endurance. And he said something very useful to me. He said, he felt similarly as a young bhikkhu himself. So this was enormously helpful. It's like, okay, I'm not the only one, I'm not crazy. This wonderful master is telling me that he felt the exact same thing. And he's telling me that the situation is optimistic, because the other thing he said is, your experience is true. That perception that you're in a house which is on fire is correct. Nothing's going wrong. The only issue is that the mindfulness and clear comprehension samadhi isn't strong enough yet to be able to separate out from that. But if you patiently endure with it, it will become strong enough. So please don't give up and please keep going. So that was tremendously helpful advice. And to know that the great masters have been through similar challenges, and to know that patient endurance is what develops the parami, the spiritual powers, enough for the samadhi to develop. Because once the mind becomes familiar with kanika samadhi, then upajjhara samadhi, there will be periods in the day where it experiences coolness and it can rest. And that energy that comes from the samatha, the coolness, the peacefulness, that gives us nourishment to keep going on, the pure mental joy that the other factors of jhana, the piti, sukha. So that only comes, though, as I was talking about, from consistency and practice. That's why I'm encouraging a session of sitting in the morning, a session of sitting in the evening. And the practice is also chanting, listening to Dhamma talks. But in terms of refining the mindfulness, making the mindfulness stronger, developing samadhi, the formal sitting posture is necessary for most people. Some people cultivate a lot of the walking practice. So I just wanted to share with you that I've had my own challenges and struggles, and received good instruction, and kept practicing. And these days, generally, I don't feel like disrobing, and have great faith, and have a sense of refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha in my heart fairly consistently. And I wish the same for all of you. And I hope that something that I said has been helpful. And I also wanted to give the opportunity for asking any questions today, if anybody has any.
If anyone has any questions regarding to today's practice.
Yeah.
Good morning, Ajahn.
Morning.
I am paying you highest respect.
Sadhu.
So, our meditation is the main problem, main obstacle, 10 klesa. So, what is the difference in difference and detachment? Could you give us a definition and brief explanation each of 10 klesa, the mental impurities?
I actually didn't understand you. Did you write your question down?
About 10 klesa, can explain about 10 klesa?
10 kilesas.
Defilement.
Okay, yeah. So there's another list, the upakilesa, 16 upakilesa, I think there's one. So I don't know if I can remember them off my head, but I know there's they're explained as dark qualities that invade the mind. So I know that you have, the ones that I can remember, you have avarice, like it's basically the ways that greed and hatred manifest in the mind. So you have jealousy, competition, avarice as a form of greed, stubbornness, pride, and so competition, resentment, grudge. These are the ways that these are the ones I can remember offhand. Vanity. So in terms of how we practice with them, this is the reason why we have to meditate every day, is so that we can see them when they come into the mind. A mind that has mindfulness and clear comprehension, you'll notice that the wholesome and the unwholesome, they have a different feeling to them. So when an unwholesome mental Dhamma comes into the mind, there should be this sense of, this is not a trustworthy, this is not something I can trust. But the thing is, we all have a lot of karma with the kilesa from our unskillful actions in this and past lives. So they have some power, they have power to them. So a lot of practice is patiently enduring with them. But it is good to become familiar with the list. You're all very skilled at searching and finding your text. So it's a wonderful list to become skilled at, the 16 upakilesa, and then become familiar with it so that when it comes in the mind, it's recognized quickly. And then we have to practice patient endurance, and we also practice replacement by opposites. For example, if your mind has become overcome with irritation, aversion, and some thoughts of cruelty, so you know that you need to cultivate metta because that's the antidote. That's what will help the mind regain some balance. Sometimes if you're angry at somebody and you're thinking a nasty thought, it's difficult to go straight to metta. So what I recommend is that you have a look at your own heart and put your presence of mind there and feel what it feels like to be angry. Feel what it feels like to be cruel, and recognize that right there is suffering. And right now you're a being that's suffering because your mind is oppressed by the kilesa. And then we use the metta, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be happy, because in that moment, you're not well, you're not happy. And you use the metta to wash the kilesa out of the mind. This is how metta bhavana can be very useful. Sometimes with lust, with the avarice and greed, metta isn't the appropriate object. But you can have a look. What does it look like to have a mind that is oppressed by lust? And you will see that there's suffering there. A lot of heat, and the heart is oppressed, and also a feeling of lack, like that you're not whole and complete. You need something outside of yourself to be complete. So when you recognize that suffering, we can train ourselves in recognizing dukkha characteristic. And then you use metta once again, wash it out, wash it out, wash it out. And so recognizing the mind state, using samatha practices, and sometimes reflective practices. Once the mind comes down a bit, we do have to do the body contemplations. Another thing which is effective, once the kilesa has arisen, if it's strong, if it's stubborn, if it won't go away easily, we have to remind ourselves, I might die today. This is another important part of the practice tradition, is this marananusati. It was a very important part of Mayajan's practice for the first 4 years of his bhikkhu life. Sometimes we do recollection of death. Something that I like to recommend to my students is a recollection of rebirth. When you have a strong and unruly mind state in your mind, then you can ask yourself, if I die right now, where am I likely to be reborn? If I die right now, holding on to my grudge and my desire for revenge, where will I be born? If I die right now with my unruly sexual fantasy, all of the things I want to do with the genitals of another being, where will you be born? And this can be very sobering and very powerful. Sometimes there's stubbornness. You don't want to admit that you might die today, so sometimes we have to really think about it, ask ourselves, is it possible? We had our Katina ceremony a couple of weeks ago. And I have a beautiful chedi in my monastery that has 300,000 blessed amulets inside and Buddha relics. And there was a great master there, and his attendant was beside him. And his attendant stood on a snake next to the chedi, and the snake bit him. And this is a really wonderful, he didn't die, but this is a wonderful recollection, because it's like, the chedi is blessed, the chedi is auspicious, the master is there, he's in the presence of the master, and the snake still bit him, because karma is karma. This particular monk used to be a kickboxer, so he had caused many bruises and many sharp, painful feelings in many beings. And so his karma sometimes ripens in this way. His merit, it wasn't a poisonous snake. His karma, the fangs did enter the skin and he did feel pain. Recently, an abbot of a monastery in our lineage in Ubon Ratchathani had a tree whack him in the face, and he died in hospital 3 days later. So you can imagine a forest monk wandering in a jungle. A tree might fall on you in a storm, but you don't imagine the abbot of an established forest monastery walking around in his monastery being killed by a tree. But it happened. And so we have to remind ourselves from this. Apparently, as many people die in their bathrooms as die from car accidents. So it is absolutely possible. And so we have to remind ourselves, I really could die today. I don't know when and I don't know how. Do I want to die with this mind state? And you ask yourself, if I do die with this mind state, where am I going? From talking with my own teachers, the most important factors in the kind of rebirth that we attain is the general level of the mind over that lifetime. So if you were mostly a human being, you had your 5 precepts, and you behave like a human being, you'll most likely go to a human realm. If you were keeping your ethical precepts, meditating, practicing forgiveness, developing metta, you'll probably go to a deva realm. If you had familiarity with upajjhara samadhi, or maybe some experience of jhana, you might go to the heaven of the contented. But the other important thing, most important thing in rebirth, is the mind state at the moment of death. And Lord Buddha explains, there's a sutta where Lord Buddha explains that there's no guarantee, unless you're a stream enterer, there's no guarantee that you won't go to a woeful dukkati. He said it's like throwing a stick up in the air. We've all done kusala and akusala acts. You never know which end of the stick will hit the ground. So that's all of us, unless you're established in stream entry, that's a risk that we all face. So we remind ourselves of these things, and this is how we put the kilesas down. Sometimes we need to sober the mind. Sometimes we need to have compassion and metta. But the important thing is we need to have the presence of mind that recognizes that an unwholesome state has arisen. And then we make the effort to abandon it. So that's why I was recommending that we have a commitment to the daily practice, preferably every morning and every evening. And later on, when people have their degrees and doctors, then hopefully you'll meditate every morning, every afternoon, and every evening. Because as I said earlier, mindfulness gets stronger and gets more resilient with consistency and repetition over a period of months and years. If you can increase your sessions of practice, and if you can increase your consistency, then your mindfulness will get stronger. You'll recognize the unwholesome faster, and you will actually have the power, the mindfulness power, to let it go. So it's kind of a weak, fuzzy quality of mindfulness. You might know the mind has an unwholesome quality, but you can't drop it. When there's a good quality of mindfulness, you know the unwholesome and you are able to abandon it. Having said that, Lompo Char in one talk said that half of practice is knowing what you should let go of and not being able to. That's half of practice. Half the time you know it and you can let go. The other half you know, you want to let go, but you can't yet. But this is an important thing to understand. It's the recognizing the unwholesome, having the intention to let it go and trying to let it go. That is what conditions the possibility to be able to in the future. So this is where the patient endurance is very important. Patiently enduring with an arisen unwholesome state, knowing it's unwholesome, wanting to abandon it, trying to abandon it, it's not going. One patiently endures until it ceases by itself. But that through making that skillful effort in the future, we are able to head it off more quickly and let it go once it has arisen, when the spiritual powers get powerful enough. So,
Any more questions?
translate it.
Oh, over there. Pass the microphone. It's not.
I would like to
Good morning, Ajahn.
Morning.
I have two questions. The first one is it possible to gain enlightenment just by practicing for Brahma Vihara without switching to Vipassana? And the second one, is there a practice of Maha Karuna, Maha Maitri, the great compassion, great loving kindness in this tradition? Thank you.
Apparently, one can attain, one can liberate the mind with the metta bhavana, but the way it was explained to me by my teacher is the insight is, well, the practice is one develops metta to the point of the jhanic state, the absorption, the apana samadhi, but then with one's mindfulness, one is aware of the mind as it attains to the samadhi state, is liberated from the five hindrances and is one-pointed. As the mind leaves the samadhi state, as it always does, then one notices the changing of the quality of the texture of the mind, that it begins to have some thoughts, comes out from having samadhi back down to upajjhara samadhi and then down to a more normal state. So it's the insight into the impermanence, that the state arose due to conditions, stayed due to conditions and ceased according to its nature. But the insight is noticing the arising, staying for some time and ceasing of the Brahmavihara state. And one can develop insight, potentially liberating insight, if one is very sincere in doing that. With regards, is Mahakaruna cultivated in the Theravada? That's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking it. So, certainly was the Buddha a Theravadan or a Mahayanist? So certainly Lord Buddha had Mahakaruna. And when you look at the causes to be a great disciple, Sariputta or Mahamoggallana, a chief disciple, they, as we all know, Lord Buddhas have the parami to be an arahant and psychic powers already, and they meet a Buddha, they're inspired, they want to be like him, they ask for a prediction of Buddhahood. Once they receive their prediction of Buddhahood, it is 4 asankhya, 4 incalculable periods plus 100,000 eons, and they're guaranteed of Buddhahood. With a chief disciple, they also request of a Buddha the opportunity to be a chief disciple. They have to cultivate for 2 asankhya and 100,000 eons. Then there is the other chief disciples, not chief disciples, but foremost disciples. They practice for 1 asankhya and 100,000 eons. Now it starts to get a bit, most people, only a Buddha actually knows what an asankhya is, an incalculable period. Incalculable is an interesting word. It means you can't figure it out with a calculator. It's so long. But something that we might get a bit of a sense for is that bit at the end, 100,000 eons. So that means the time from the Big Bang, the expansion of the universe, the contraction and everything burning up again. So in this eon we have 5 teaching Buddhas. So that's an enormously long period of time, and that's 1 eon. Apparently before this eon there were 20 eons with no teaching Buddhas. In the eon before that there was Sikhi and Wesabu. So samsara is very long. But even the arahants with full psychic powers, If you want to be an arahant with abhinya, you're talking about adding a few thousand lives to your journey towards enlightenment. And so many Theravadins practitioners have this kind of vague idea. They want to be an arahant, they want to be enlightened. But many people have vows from past lives that they're not conscious of, that is affecting them. And so it might manifest like this. One lifetime, many lifetimes ago, you met one arahant who had psychic powers, and you loved and respected him or her, and you made offerings, and you made just a vow. I want to be just like you. Every time you made an offering and bowed at your Lumpo's holy feet, Lumpo, so beautiful, so wonderful, all these abilities of teaching, these wonderful things you told me about past lives, these things, these fun stories and these fun ways, and help me understand my life situation and navigate more skillfully. I want to be just like you. I want to be able to recollect past lives. I want to see devas. I want to know people's characters. And you just set that aspiration. If you don't uproot that vow is still active. And so it takes hundreds and hundreds of more lives from the time that you could have been an arahant to be an arahant with abhinya. And so I don't care what color robe you're wearing, you're all building parami, you're all accumulating merit and making qualities, and many of you have vows that you're not mindful of. This one has a red robe this life, this one has a yellow one, orange one. And I think most of us who have the merit to have gone forth in this life have had lives in India as monastics and lives in China as monastics, because Buddhism was there for so many centuries and was very well supported. So if you were a Mahayana practitioner once, suppose you're a Mahayana nun or monk, you've made the Bodhisattva vow as part of your morning puja and evening puja, for 40 years? 700 times a year, 7,000 times 4, 14, 28,000 times you made a Bodhisattva vow in one life, if you were a Mahayanist, if you were a monastic. So it is good to be clear. If you really do want the fast track to Arahant and Sotapanna, Tana Jantan, disciple of Vajirayanamuni, says that you have to make your mind peaceful as you can, and you have to relinquish past vows. That's if you want fast track to arahantship. If you're not sure, you don't know what vows you've made, you have some kind of idea that you want to liberate yourself, but you want to help others as well, well, then you just keep up with your practice and it will ripen the way it ripens. And so with regards to Theravadins have Mahakaruna, I would say in any group of monks, there are those who have the aspiration to have psychic powers. There are those that have the aspiration to be have the miracle of teaching, for example, analytical knowledges. There are those who want to be chief disciples, foremost disciples, and there are some who aspire to be Buddhas. So it's a personal matter, but there definitely are Bodhisattva practitioners in Thailand. There are. Some of them quite developed, and they might not tell you. They might not tell you that. But a lot of these ones that people line up for hours and want to ask questions about their business and want to ask questions about whether they can sell their land and want to talk about their troublesome child. And these people that receive guests for hours and hours a day, oftentimes quite elderly. Okay, that's looking a bit like a Bodhisattva practitioner to me. But then also my teacher said there were plenty of arahants in Tibet. There are a lot of arahants in Tibet because when your practice gets to a certain point, and you glimpse cessation or you glimpse nirodha, vimutti sukh, the peace of the liberated mind. And I remember the Dalai Lama giving a teaching in Melbourne where he said he had a retreat and he had an experience of nirodha, and he says, oh, and I really liked it. Oh, but, he said, he was very interested, and he said, but then he cultivated bodhicitta. So my teacher said plenty of practitioners in China and Tibet in the past who've had an experience of cessation, a glimpse the liberated mind, titanga vimutti, a temporary liberation. Some of them think, okay, that's what I want. I am fed up with this dukkha. And they cash in their chips and they go for arahantship, and it happens. Similarly, when you look at Lumpur Man, my teacher's teacher's teacher, the kind of lineage guru of the Thai forest tradition in the modern era. In his biography, he told his students that it had been 500 lives since he could have been an arahant, and then he cultivated for an extra 500 lives. He had a series of dreams, and he saw how far he'd come, but he also saw that was so much further to go. And then he said, okay, I'm going to aspire for arahantship this lifetime. And he did, he succeeded. But what's interesting to notice is that because of the extra 500 lives he invested, that's why he had all the amazing psychic powers, and that's why I believe he had 12 arahant disciples himself. And he was considered a kind of a regenerator of the practice tradition in northern Thailand, northeast Thailand. So yes, you do have great practitioners cultivating great compassion to different extent, and that's a personal matter. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. I can hear you. I don't understand. Sorry. The difference. Yes. Yes. Real Kalyanamita and Mahasangha. Which is most important, yes. So what is most important, Mahasangha or Kalyanamita in life? So it depends, it really depends who you have the merit to meet. So when you use the word Mahasangha, for me, the thing that makes a Sangha member great is the sincerity of their practice. The sincerity of Mahasangha doesn't mean lots of monks and nuns. Mahasangha means truly great. Truly great means well practiced, sincere. So give me one well practiced monk, please, that I can consider as my Kalyanamitta, and then I'm happy. But of course, in our daily life, Kalyanamitta, Lord Buddha says, is all of the holy life. And that's a very interesting statement when he admonished one monk, and he said, Kalyanamitta is important. And he says, no, Kalyanamitta is all of the holy life. So we do have to look at who we associate with and how that affects our mind. So sometimes our best friends in terms of the people we love the most, the people who are the most fun to be with, we do have to be honest with ourselves. How do we affect one another's minds? And if in spending time with that person, do good qualities increase or decrease? And sometimes we shouldn't spend too much time with the people that we love the most, because we love them. We don't spend too much time with them because we want to both grow in the Dhamma and the discipline. So yeah, we do have to. And sometimes somebody might be a bit tedious to hang out with because they're always saying this isn't quite right and this isn't, that's wrong, and you do it like this, it would be better. That can be a bit annoying. But if it's true, when our Lord Buddha says that we should stay with the sage that points out our faults, he said, yes, it's not an easy practice, but we choose to stay with people who will actually help us work on our weak points and strengthen our strengths. And we have to spend less time with people that encourage our weakness. But if you know, for myself, 29 years of practice, still very important for me to visit my own teacher a few times a year. So I do consider him to be Mahasangha. And then there are other great Sangha members. I'm very lucky. I have good teachers. But we need to see them, pay respects. And we have a practice of asking forgiveness once a year on the birthday. That's very helpful as well. Kind of wiping the slate clean, because we all have unskillful thoughts and speech in moments if we're not fully purified. So yeah, and just remembering Sangha as refuge, having a teacher that you genuinely respect, making the effort to visit that teacher, and paying respects, making offerings, asking forgiveness. Very, very important, very helpful for your practice. And yes, and I'd say they're probably equally important, actually. Have some true Sangha as your refuge and some true good friends. We need both.
พระอาจารย์
Yes.
Some bhikkhuni have some question.
One last one.
Some
Yes. There was another
I
one.
would like to pay respect Achan and Mahasangha. I have one question. When I practice meditation, with sitting meditation, and sometimes my body feel pain, and I keep the mindfulness to observe painful and understand pain just is the feeling. But sometimes my mind lost the mindfulness and just have a little bit mindfulness and cannot observe the painful. And then I continue to practice metta meditation with my painful. But sometimes I cannot practice the mindfulness or cannot practice the metta meditation, and my mind want to change the posture. And I have the question that Ajahn please help me to give me the right way to practice to cultivate mindfulness or cultivate concentration with the painful to have the more mindfulness and have the more concentration. Thank you, Ajahn.
The person speaking, please raise your hand. Who is it? Where are you? Where? Outside, is it? Oh, okay. After how many minutes you get the painful feeling in your session?
With maybe 45
Yeah, okay.
or maybe 1 hour, but
Right.
as I practice the metta meditation, but
Yeah.
sometimes I just have a little bit mindfulness to observe, and then my mind want to change the posture.
Yeah.
But then the deeply, my mind don't want to change the posture to cultivate the deeply concentrate.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would recommend trying to sit for the hour, but if after the hour it's quite painful and there's some irritation, then I think it is okay to walk. And the way I understand it, the samadhi will develop, it doesn't develop so much within one 15-day retreat. It will develop over a period of years. If you sit for an hour every morning and every evening, every day, what's going to happen is that you're going to become quite familiar with the pain and in a way get used to it. And then if you have that as a foundation, your mindfulness gets stronger when your mindfulness is able to separate from the pain. And the thing is, it's like once you've done it 100 times, 1,000 times, a few thousand times, it becomes familiar territory. It's like you can just sit with that pain without getting too irritated. Once you have that as the foundation, you can increase it. So sit for an hour and 15, and then sit for an hour and a half. But it's over a period of weeks, months, and years, not over a period of a few days. So we have to have that deep, resolute commitment long term. And one thing that can be helpful is breathing. So suppose you get to the point where you really want to change your posture and there's irritation in the mind. So you say to yourself, okay, in 10 breaths, normal natural breaths, not fast breaths. Like, okay, 1, and count them. 1, another breath, 2. And very often when you get to the 10th breath, the pain has come down a bit, the irritation's come down a bit, you can sit a bit longer. And then it comes again like waves, and you say again, okay, 10 more breaths, you can move. 10. And then and we get some skill at working with it at that point, where you're giving yourself, okay, you can move if you really want to, but just 10 more breaths. And we're training the mind not to react at that point and to watch the way the pain peaks and then comes down a bit. And if we keep doing that, sometimes you can go for 15 more minutes. And you leave that experience with a calm state that was forbearing and working with it, not just putting up with it, not just getting annoyed and getting through it, but actually working with it. And then when you get some practice, it gets easier. You get familiar with it. For myself, I like to do retreats in Bodh Gaya where I sit for 2.5 hours, 4 times a day. That's something I've done quite often for a month or so. But I allow myself to change my posture slightly. So after 45 minutes, I sit with the right leg on the left for 45 minutes. Then I just allow myself to wriggle slightly and put my left leg on top of my right leg and put a pillow behind my bottom at the back. So it's just a little bit of movement without opening my eyes. And then I sit for another hour and a quarter. And in my experience, it's that second session that the mind's more likely to get peaceful. The first 45 minutes is like pacifying the hindrances. Then you've got an hour and 15 minutes where the body has already got some mindfulness and you're already settled into the meditation somewhat. And then after that hour and 15, I sit for another half an hour. And sometimes just put the leg around the side, what the Thai call puppy up. But you get 2.5 hours. Sometimes, and if you're committed to that, you're doing 2.5 hours, 4 times a day for a month. Sometimes the mind's peaceful, you don't need to move. So you get experience of, I sat 2.5 hours without moving. You get some experience of it, and then you get a bit more confident. But you don't put too much pressure on the mind. You don't want it to become too brittle. And you have metta. You want to support the body as well. So that's generally what I would do. 2.5 hours, but changing posture after 45 minutes, changing posture again after an hour and 15 minutes, then getting up after another half hour, do some walking, come back and do it again. Then when you will get experience, and you'll get experience when you practice like that of being peaceful when there's pain in the body, pain in the experience, and not being peaceful. It's like sometimes the mind can be peaceful with pain and sometimes it can't be. But we're also developing the awareness of the arising and ceasing. We're also developing the awareness of the way feelings change. And you can actually develop insight you can get these vipassana jnanas by noticing the way pain changes. But you do need to have that nice quality of mindfulness, some stability for it to become insight. So I wish you success. Keep going. Long-term determination. One of the reasons I like to do it in Bodh Gaya is because it lifts your level of faith. Faith is the first of the 5 spiritual powers. Then the next is energy. When you lift your faith, you've got energy, and you can apply that energy to doing more practice. It's one of the reasons I do it in India. It's very helpful.
Firstly, I'm pay respect to you. And the question I want to ask you is about metta. I have learned about metta, and it is a part of metta. I have studied that if we cannot cultivate peace and we cannot cultivate loving kindness in our mind, but we cannot separate our loving kindness to other people because we don't have peace in our mind. In this here, parents and their children, the parents stay here, their children or their son or daughter stay away from them. But their parents are facing some difficulties. That's why they are very angry because of some problems. For example, as economic problems, family cases like this. That's why the parent cannot cultivate peace in their mind. They cannot cultivate loving kindness in their mind. Otherwise, they want their children, their son and daughter, to be peace, to be free from dangerous. At the time, the parents separate their loving kindness to their children. I want to know is this a kind of metta or not? If is this a kind of metta, how can the kind of metta can bring good advantages to their children? Yeah, that's my question.
To children.
Yes, as son and daughter. Yes, as parents.
The big challenge for us all in samsara is karma. So the law of karma among the conditions is extremely powerful. So sometimes when people have great difficulties, say wars or things like that, then extreme economic hardship and conflict in society, constant fear of death, then it's not really possible for these people to cultivate. Because if a person was a practitioner before
Yes.
they meet hardship, then those people can, to some degree. But if a person isn't trained and they have a lot of challenges and difficulties, this is kind of the sadness of samsara, that because of past unskillful karmas they meet difficulty, and then when they meet difficulty they make more bad karma, and there's no getting out. But if ideally, we can always talk about ideally, but life is often just what happens, right? It's not ideal. But ideally, parents, before they have a child, will already be cultivators,
Yes.
already be skilled at having metta for themselves. Having a child because they want to love another being and give them good opportunities, and then will help them to be patient with their children and be a good example. I think one of the most important things for parents is to be an example. So one of the things that really annoys teenagers is when parents tell them what to do, but the parents don't do it. So they get very rebellious, and they think parents are being hypocritical, can't take them seriously. But if kids have a foundation of mum and dad are genuinely virtuous, they go to the temple, they pay respects, they listen to Lumpur, they make offerings. There might be a period of the time where the child isn't into it, but oftentimes they come back because the foundation is good. They had good examples. But if mum and dad told them what they should do and mum and dad didn't do it, then normally it doesn't happen. And but there is a strong karmic connection between mother and father and children. So normally they should be receptive to the metta of their parents, and on some level, depends how thick their kilesa is, depends how heavy the karma is. Sometimes children come in as a way of like a negative karmic ripening for parents as well. Sometimes kids come in and they can be really a big headache, and you don't know where they came from. They came from the Asurakai, in Thai they call them, animal realm. Other times, this is all sorts of things, isn't it? Like, what was the mind state when the child was conceived? So if people are angry or very passionate, or you don't know what's coming in, and there is a practice in Thailand for people, and China, for people who want a virtuous baby. They'll go to specific shrines and they'll ask for, I want a child, and may that child be from a good place. That is skillful, because I kind of see it as having a child is a bit like Russian roulette. You don't know which bullet, you don't know which one's coming. But it's dependent on everyone's karma. The parents have their karma, the kids have their karma, everyone has different karma. But the best way to teach children is through example, and then dedicate merit to them, and make the wish that we all grow in Dhamma together whenever we do this practice, that me, my kids, my parents, my ancestors, just keep making that wish. Some people are receptive, some people aren't. Depends on the closeness of the karmic connection. It depends on whether you did good things together in the past or unskillful things together in the past. So.
Thank you for your answer.
I think that's it for today. Would you like me to translate? Or Ajahn? So as Venerable Ajahn Chakun Vajirayanamuni has delivered his Dhamma talk in English, I would also like to translate a little bit to our Thai practitioners as well. ก็ขอกราบถวายความเคารพท่านเจ้าคุณอาจารย์พระวชิรยานมุนีแล้วก็ขออนุญาตท่านเจ้าคุณอาจารย์เพื่อที่จะขอใช้เวลานิดนึงในการสรุปใจความสำคัญที่เจ้าคุณอาจารย์ได้บรรยายเป็นภาษาอังกฤษให้กับโยคีผู้ปฏิบัติทุกท่านนะครับโดยในหัวข้อที่ท่านเจ้าคุณอาจารย์ได้บรรยายในวันนี้เกี่ยวกับพรหมวิหาร4ในการพัฒนาหรือยกระดับจิตหรือ Four Brahma Viharas for mental cultivation ที่หัวข้อดังที่ทุกท่านได้เห็นนะครับพระอาจารย์ได้ยกตัวอย่างจากธรรมะเบื้องต้นที่ชาวพุทธเราควรรู้ไม่ว่าจะเป็นอริยสัจสี่โดยที่พระอาจารย์ได้ยกตัวอย่างเป็นทุกท่านทุกคนที่อยู่ในที่นี้รู้ถึงทุกสมุทัยนิโรธมรรคแต่ว่าพระอาจารย์ได้ย้ำกลับถึงการภาวนาแบบพรหมวิหารสี่โดยที่พระอาจารย์ท่านย้ำว่าพรหมวิหารสี่หรือการมีเมตตาจิตในการปฏิบัติกรรมฐานหรือการมีสติเป็นการปฏิบัติแบบองค์รวมในขณะที่เราหายใจเข้าให้มีความสุขหายใจออกมีความสุขให้ระลึกนึกถึงเมตตาอยู่ในจิตที่กำลังบำเพ็ญบารมีอยู่เสมอเพราะฉะนั้นการบำเพ็ญจิตด้วยเมตตาภาวนานั้นจะก่อให้เกิดกุศลกรรมนะอย่างที่พระอาจารย์ได้ย้ำถึง wholesome action หรือกุศลหรือ goodwill action อย่างที่พระอาจารย์ท่านบอกก็ให้มันจะก่อให้เกิดกุศลจิตมากกว่าอกุศลจิตไม่ว่าจะเป็นการอิจฉาริษยาต่างๆที่พระอาจารย์ยกตัวอย่างก็คืออกุศลมูลทั้งหลายอีกทั้งพระอาจารย์ได้กล่าวถึงการสร้างแรงจูงใจโดยการบำเพ็ญกรุณานะครับเพราะว่าในขณะที่เรากำลังปฏิบัติอยู่นั้นจิตที่เป็นอกุศลไม่ว่าจะเต็มไปด้วยนิวรณ์ต่างๆก็ให้รบกวนสมาธิของเราการมีเมตตากรุณาก็เป็นสิ่งสำคัญในการกำจัดสิ่งเหล่านั้นในขณะปฏิบัติแล้วก็point ที่3คือมุทิตาหรือการ appreciate หรือเขาใช้คำว่าการระลึกนึกถึงรู้สึกขอบคุณหรือรู้สึกยินดีในการศักยภาพที่เราบำเพ็ญบารมีอยู่นั้นในการปฏิบัติกรรมฐานของเรานะครับเนื่องจากว่าคนทุกคนในที่นี้เราเกิดมาก็เกิดมาเป็นมนุษย์ก็ถือว่าเป็นบุญแล้วการเกิดมาเป็นมนุษย์แล้วได้ฟังพระธรรมคำสอนของพระพุทธเจ้าหรือได้ปฏิบัติตามคำสอนของพระพุทธเจ้าก็ถือว่าเป็นสิ่งที่ประเสริฐและการระลึกนึกถึงอดีตบุญบารมีที่เราสังสมมาตั้งแต่อดีตนะครับก็คือประสบการณ์ที่พวกเราท่านทั้งหลายที่มาอยู่ตรงนี้เป็นอีกหนึ่งเหตุผลที่เรามาอยู่ด้วยกันก็คือการที่เราได้บำเพ็ญกุศลบำเพ็ญบุญในอดีตชาติมาก่อนเพราะฉะนั้นการระลึกนึกถึงบุญเหล่านี้อยู่เป็นเนืองนิดก็เป็นสิ่งสำคัญและพระอาจารย์ได้ย้ำถึงการปฏิบัติหรือการระลึกนึกถึงภาวนาทั้ง3ปัญญาที่เกิดจากภาวนานะไม่ว่าจะเป็นสุตตมยปัญญาจินตมยปัญญาและก็ภาวนามยปัญญาสุตตะคือการฟังธรรมแล้วการปฏิบัติจินตะคือการคิดตามนะแต่สิ่งสำคัญคือภาวนาปัญญาภาวนามยปัญญานะครับปัญญาที่เกิดจากการภาวนาเพราะว่าการภาวนาเป็นสิ่งที่จะนำไปสู่ทุกคนโยคีผู้ปฏิบัติทุกท่านสู่จิตที่หลุดพ้น อีกทั้งพระอาจารย์ได้ย้ำถึงการระลึกนึกถึงพรหมวิหาร 4ในการปฏิบัติให้ได้วิปัสสนาญาณทั้ง16ขั้นนะครับและแน่นอนการที่พวกเราทั้งหลายได้มาปฏิบัติอยู่ตรงนี้ไม่ว่าจะเป็นนิสิตนักศึกษาที่เราได้เรียนรู้มาตั้งแต่ขณะเราบวชนะขณะแล้วก็มาเรียนอยู่ที่ IBSC นี้ไม่ว่าจะการศึกษาการปฏิบัติเราควรจะระลึกนึกถึงเสมอว่าการมีสมาธินั้นหรือการมีสติอยู่ตลอดเวลานั้นมันเป็นไม่ใช่เรื่องง่ายๆนะครับต้องบำเพ็ญเป็นปีๆเพราะทุกวันนี้พระอาจารย์ได้ย้ำว่ามี distraction มากมายไม่ว่าจะเป็นสมาร์ทโฟนของเราแท็บเล็ตของเราที่สามารถดึงดูดความสนใจเป็นอาจจะเป็นบ่อเกิดทั้งกุศลและอกุศลได้ในเวลาเดียวกันถ้าเราใช้ถูกวิธีมันก็จะนำไปสู่จิตที่เป็นกุศลใช้เป็นเวลาถ้าเราใช้ผิดประเภทมันก็จะไปสู่จิตที่เป็นอบายหรืออกุศลนั้นก็มีหลายๆอย่างที่พระอาจารย์ได้กล่าวถึงตามธรรมเนียมปฏิบัติของหลวงพ่อพระเดชพระคุณหลวงพ่อชาหรือธรรมเนียมที่ทางพระอาจารย์เองได้ปฏิบัติมาตั้งแต่สมัยท่านบวชตั้งแต่28พรรษาเกือบทั้ง3ทศวรรษพระอาจารย์บอกว่าการต่อเนื่องหรือ consistency เป็นสิ่งที่จะก่อให้เกิดสติปัฏฐานหรือมีสติอยู่ได้ตลอดเวลาไม่ใช่อาจจะสำหรับบางท่านอาจจะมาปฏิบัติแล้วไม่ว่าจะเป็น10วัน15วันเป็นการบำเพ็ญบารมีที่ดีแต่ไม่ใช่ง่ายสำหรับทุกคนที่จะทำให้เกิดสมาธิในเวลาอันสั้นนี้ต้องบำเพ็ญบารมีเป็นปีๆอย่างที่พระอาจารย์ท่านได้กล่าวนะครับเพราะว่าเนื่องจากสติของเราถูกทำลายง่ายมากเลยนะครับไม่ว่าเราอาจจะมาปฏิบัติ10วัน15วันเพื่อให้เกิดสติแต่เพียงครู่เดียวก็ทำให้สติเหล่านั้นแตกสลายไปได้และพระอาจารย์ได้เล่าถึงประสบการณ์ส่วนตัวในการปฏิบัติวิปัสสนากรรมฐานตั้งแต่พระอาจารย์สมัยที่พระอาจารย์ยังเป็นบวชพรรษาแรกที่วัดป่านานาชาติหรือสำนักสงฆ์วัดเต่าดำที่กาญจนบุรีต่างๆโดยที่ได้พบปะกับครูบาอาจารย์ไม่ว่าจะเป็นหลวงพ่ออนันต์หรือครูบาอาจารย์สายวัดป่านะครับท่านได้ย้ำถึงประสบการณ์ส่วนตัวว่าพระอาจารย์ได้ปฏิบัติมา28ปีท่านปฏิบัติเช้าเย็นแล้วตั้งแต่ตื่นนอนขึ้นมาพระอาจารย์จำลมหายใจของตัวเองได้มีสติในการลมหายใจตั้งแต่ตื่นมาจนถึงเข้านอนนะฮะท่านระลึกนึกถึงลมหายใจแรกได้และก็มีเวทนาหรือมีความรู้สึกใต้เท้าที่พระอาจารย์สามารถสัมผัสได้นะครับเพราะฉะนั้นพระอาจารย์ได้ตอนสรุปท้ายๆพระอาจารย์ก็ได้ย้ำถึงการมีศรัทธาต่อพระพุทธเจ้านะครับเพราะว่าศรัทธาเป็นสิ่งที่จะทำให้เรานำไปสู่การปฏิบัติที่มีผลและมีมากขึ้นนะครับให้เราระลึกนึกถึงกรรมนะให้มีศรัทธาและกงล้อแห่งธรรมที่พระอาจารย์ได้บอกนี่เป็นสิ่งที่ทำให้พระอาจารย์ท่านมีความมุ่งมั่นในการอยู่ในภาคาสาวพัสนี้เพราะว่าทุกข์มันเกิดได้จากสิ่งภายนอกแบบง่ายได้นะเพราะฉะนั้นการที่จะให้ดับทุกข์ได้ง่ายนั้นให้เราลึกนึกถึงให้มีสติอยู่ตลอดเวลาในการปฏิบัติและโดยเฉพาะพระสงฆ์ที่เป็นฝ่ายบรรพชิตไม่ว่าจะเป็นพระสงฆ์ทุกนิกายเถรวาทมหายานวัชรยานหรือภิกษุณีสามเณรีแม่ชีพระอาจารย์ก็ให้ข้อคิดไว้ว่าให้บำเพ็ญเพียรให้มีความเพียรในการอยู่ในภาคาสาวพัสแล้วก็ให้ปฏิบัติอยู่เป็นเนืองนิดเพื่อให้เกิดสติสมาธิเป็นต้นนี่คือใจความสำคัญที่กับผมอาตมาได้จดประเด็นจากการบรรยายธรรมของพระเดชพระคุณหรือท่านเจ้าคุณอาจารย์วชิรยานมุนีนะครับก็ขอสรุปเป็นสั้นๆให้กับทุกท่าน นะครับ so on this opportunity as we have been to this end of today's Dhamma talk session, I would like to take this opportunity from all the venerable ajahns and all the practitioners here to sincerely thanks to Venerable Ajahn Chokun, Phra Vajirayanamuni, or Venerable Ajahn Achalo Bhikkhu. And now I would like to invite Venerable Ajahn Pramha Dwangtip, Pariyatitari, to offer a souvenir as a Dhamma gift. Sadhu. So I think this is the second time that Venerable Ajahn Achalo has been here to give Dhamma talk to the practitioners of MC. So now we would like to take this opportunity to พระอาจารย์ให้พรก่อนไหมได้ให้กำลังใจกันได้ไม่ใช่
In the living practice tradition in Thailand, there are still some great practitioners who have some special abilities in the area of the abhinya, recollecting past lives and such. And I know some of these people, and occasionally I get to talk, and from what I've heard of my own past lives, there is some lives in India, some lives in Tibet, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, and Burma. So when I thought of coming this morning, I was thinking there's just this sense of we've probably all known each other in many lives. You know, we're engaged in this process of cultivating Sila Samadhi Panya, and this lifetime I might have gone forth a few years before you. Past lives, some of you may have been my teachers and mentors. In the future, we don't know under what circumstances we meet each other, but when we have the good fortune to have gone forth, we are Kalyanamitta to each other. And so whatever merits accumulated from my practice, I'm happy to share with you. I ask you to please rejoice in my merits, and I also rejoice in your merits. And I sincerely wish that you keep going, don't give up, cultivate a lot of metta, support yourself in the practice, and put forth a lot of effort. And let's all continue to grow in Buddha Dhamma together until we are liberated. Wishing you well. Good luck in your studies and your practice.
So now we pay respect to Venerable Ajahn Chokun together. Anjali.